Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our Halloween Horror Fest. This is a spoiler review of Exhuma. We'll now talk in more detail about plot points of the film, hopefully taking a deeper dive into the themes and the storytelling. The film is broken into two parts. The first part deals with the ancestral haunting. This rich client and his family are being haunted by his grandfather, the spirit who is not at rest and is vengeful. The seeds of the eventual reveal at the end of the film, when we realize what's going on behind this initial story, those things are established early on when Kim Sung-gyuk sees the burial plot that this guy's ancestor was buried on. He describes it as sour ground. It seems like it's completely a poisoned area, and he's like, why on earth would anyone choose this ground for an ancestor, a respected family member that you're trying to honor? The longitudinal and latitudinal coordinates are off. They're off kilter, apparently, from a spiritual perspective. The ground feels poisonous. And then the grave itself is unmarked except for some numbers which aren't immediately identified. So everything about this grave site spooks the heck out of the feng shui master, and he has a really bad feeling about all this, and we eventually find out why. But anyway, it's not hard to see initially why this spirit would be vengeful. He was not laid to rest in a proper fashion. And in Korean folk practices, if a person is not laid to rest with the appropriate practices, shamanic rituals, if they're not put in good ground, using the principles of feng shui, they can't pass over into the spiritual realm and be at peace. This is especially important because the client wants the coffin and his ancestor immediately cremated once he's been exhumed. And the feng shui master is like, well, that's a little odd. Why, you don't even want to be there and look and have us, do the rituals we would normally do. And he's like, no, I want it cremated. So that's a big deal because, as you find out later, if he's cremated, if the body is cremated before certain things or rituals are practiced or before he's laid to rest, then he's just going to be in spiritual purgatory forever. He won't be able to pass. That's eventually what happens. The grandfather has turned into this malevolent spirit, and that seems to be like the major source of the horror, right? But that's apparently resolved an hour into the film. We've got an hour left. What's going to happen here?
Yeah,
And so the key to what comes after, the part two of the story, has to do with the idea that this guy's grandfather, one of the keys of understanding why he was laid to rest in the way he was, is that he was a Japanese collaborator, or a collaborator with Imperial Japan. So he was helping the Japanese to occupy and suppress the Korean population and exploit resources in return, of course, for the perks of being a collaborator. So he's, even in life, he was a morally suspect person, and in death, it makes sense that he would be this ghoulish, vengeful spirit. Um, Funnily enough, even though it's the first half of the film, I think that's the most horror-esque part of the whole film.
sure.
Uh, yeah, the first part feels very much like a traditional,
Yeah,
ghost story, a horror-esque ghost story. The second part is where we pass, I think, from horror into dark fantasy.
yeah.
It feels more like a really great dark action adventure fantasy film.
What you said about the first act, yeah, it's very much more driven by the horror. And actually, that's when a creepy moment occurs when the coffin is removed. One of the gravediggers sees in the burial plot that they dug up this human-headed snake. I was like, whoa. I mean, it was just unexpected, and I was like, that is so creepy. And then
Although I don't think the gravedigger immediately realizes that it's a human-headed snake. He
yeah,
kills it,
he
you
kills
know,
it.
it cuts it in half with his shovel, and then it shrieks. It's unclear to me whether or not anyone hears that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is definitely a classic horror movie, and it's definitely, I think, one of the creepiest things that happens in the film. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was reading that those kinds of human head snakes feature prominently in Japanese myth and folklore. And the fact that this film connecting like these spirits with Japanese colonialism, it makes sense that this entity from Japanese folklore would be present there too. But it was just very creepy effect and well
Mm.
done. Again, using CGI in a way that wasn't distracting and was very immersive. But then when you get into the next two acts, that's when it turns into more of like a thriller with the big reveal. That's when it gets really, really, really good. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so like the big reveal and the one that like just blew my mind is the idea that there's this enormous coffin that houses some kind of 7 foot, 8 foot corpse was hidden all the time beneath the coffin of the ancestor. And it's then further revealed, this is just mind-blowing to me, is that this thing in the coffin is not a corpse, or at least it's not just a corpse. It's actually a demonic entity created by Japanese soldiers to guard one of the plots that Imperial Japan put into the soil of Korea in order to try and dominate it. So the Japanese invaders implanted iron stakes into the ground of Korea. And this is in keeping with the spiritual nature of the war that they were waging. It's supposed to literally have broken the back of Korea as a land. So the stakes are supposed to be geographically located in such a way to equate the spine of the country, and so break the spine and make it easier to dominate and control. And so that's the big reveal, is that what's mystery is that initial coffin hiding. It's hiding the principal demonic guardian of one of these iron stakes. And that guardian turns out to be a Japanese demon that was created by the Japanese soldiers. So you see through flashbacks, what they did was I assume they dressed a Japanese soldier in samurai garb, and then they killed him in a ritual fashion and turned him into a spirit, and then buried him there underneath the Korean collaborator. And so he then guards that plot, and that plot is one of the principal places for the iron stakes. And so there's a total of 6 of them. This is the only one the story deals with. And so that's the germ for Song Jiok, the feng shui master's turn from a kind of cynical huckster to really more of an idealistic action hero, because he realizes that Korea, this land, is compromised. The sins and the horrors of the past are still here, and they can still emerge and take over the country. And if I want my family and my granddaughter, especially, to be safe, I have to do something about this. And so that, he and his compatriots start to investigate further and try to undo this seismic curse.
Yeah.
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 So I refer to it as a great movie monster. What did you think of
Yeah.
the demonic samurai?
Yeah, very cool and unexpected. Yeah, it was when it appeared on screen. I couldn't tell the way it was photographing the creature. Like, what is that? At first, I thought it had maybe an elongated neck or something, or it was so vaguely, obscurely shot at first, and really sets you up for the reveal when it happens. But yeah, when it is revealed, the samurai entity, it's in a pretty cool set piece. You get a sense of its scale, and it's towering over the characters. And then, at one point turns into like a fireball. It was such a cool effect. And yeah, I think also is very much giving me like Dracula vibes too. Like this.
Totally.
Yeah, like it expected the humans to serve it as a lord.
That's one of my favorite parts, is when it reveals itself to Warren and doesn't immediately recognize that she's human. So he's like, "Are you human?" And she knows she can't answer yes. She doesn't want to do that. She's like, "No, I'm one of your servants." And he's like, "Okay, so do you have the sweet fish and melon, or was it sweet fish and some kind of fruit? I forget what it was."
Yeah.
Um, but that part was actually legitimately creepy to me. This whole idea that she's right, it's right there, and she's like has nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and if she can't keep up this ruse, then she's in deep. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I think the special effects again, I think it was just a guy, right? I mean, they used a combination of probably
Yeah.
forced perspective. Maybe there was some green screening going on, some light CGI to sell the scope, the size of this guy.
Yeah.
But it looked great, and of course the voice they got sounded great. But like the smoke and the fire and that face, that ornate, kind of like samurai visage, all the trappings of that, it was so cool. It reminded me very much of a kind of Korean version of one of the hooded riders, the Nazgul from Lord of the Rings. Uh, just has that kind of like, scary, but also that is so metal.
Yeah, and well photographed too, because in those scenes we're referencing like you definitely get that sense of scale, but the camera is very smartly shoots and photographs around its face or his face.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you don't really get a real good look at the entity until the end. And so it still keeps that sense of like suspense and makes it even more intimidating in those scenes. Like, what is
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. And I think that the themes of this film too really kind of come out in that final act, right? I mean, it's a two-act play. The final act, it features the samurai demon, and that's when it's really dealing with this question of the relationship between past and present, the burden of history, the fact that, we sure, the past is the past, but not really, right? The past is always reaching into the present and influencing it. Um, and
Yeah.
imperial and eventually fascist Japan is still influencing Korea's present. The legacy of that is embodied in this really powerful way in that demonic entity. One of the things that I keep coming back to when I think about World War II is that there was a spiritual dimension to that struggle. It was whether it was real or not, the invocation of a kind of metaphysical evil, an evil that was spiritual as well as physical, just gets invoked so powerfully by the atrocities committed by the Nazis, but also by fascist Japan. um, and so the notion that they would have actually been waging this war themselves on an occult level, and of course there's plenty of historical evidence to suggest that Hitler and the Nazis were obsessed with the occult, and
Sure.
were really key to wage their program on a spiritual level any way they could.
Yeah.
Uh, to see that invoked in this film in such a powerful way was really exhilarating for me.
Yeah. 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 Um, yeah, I think, the horror and supernatural mystery genre, has that potential to, be used as, a kind of in a metaphorical sense, for, you know, generational collective trauma. I mean, we see that all the time in horror films, historical trauma and,
Mm.
the atrocities of history. Like that's what the Gothic is all about, the ancestral, as you went into it earlier, the ancestral historical past and the traumas of the past coming back. And but particularly it really enriches the narrative, a great deal when you can draw from that because it immediately has a resonance to it, a rich history behind it. And so when you have a film like this, it's drawing on South Korean shamanism, magic, ritual. It's drawing upon, you know, the Korea's experience of Japanese occupancy and colonialism, and it just immediately automatically injects that kind of richness into it. So and elevates it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was actually like legitimately moved by the film's closing sequence where everyone, the Feng Shui master is going to be in this family portrait, this photograph, and he wants his partners to come in and be with him. And it was just this moment where this is what I think a lot of European Western demonic possession films are missing is this idea of this communal component, that you know this evil is a spiritual evil that is collective. It's not just individual. And so there has to be some sort of counter to that, and the counter has to be communal as well. And so we see this vision of Korean community, a
Yeah.
communalist ethos, these characters coming together, and they're no longer individuals. This is a community. This is a nation. And so often that component is missing. So like in The Exorcist, it's really just the family, right? It's the mom, the kid, it's the priest, and the two
Yeah.
priests would say. And the idea that larger society is implicated and involved in this deeper level just doesn't come into play. We only really see it through the medical establishment, which of course is clueless, doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah, the team, this is a team of occultists. They have that core group, and that's part of like what makes it so investing, that they are a team and they like have each other's back, and it's kind of uplifting in a horror film because they're not alone in this, they have each other, and it's always nice in terms of having a balance too in a horror film,
Mm,
that is recognizing that. And then you get that scene with a photograph at the end. And honestly, I thought it was going to be leaving things a little more ambiguous. I thought when they took the photo, you're going to see that 7 foot like samurai or some kind of ghost in the background. It's like, oh shit, but no, no, no. It lets you have that moment.
yeah.
It does not interfere with it. It just, you know, lets you have something kind of pure at the end. So,
Yeah, and I don't feel cheated by it either. I tend to like it when horror films don't horror films end badly. In fact, I usually feel cheated when they end well. A happy ending in a horror film usually depresses me and disappoints me, but it doesn't here.
yeah,
Probably because the film isn't just a horror film, right?
yeah,
Uh, you mentioned earlier that you think this core group of characters that they could be in another movie. I certainly hope they will. This film was a huge hit in Korea, one of the top grossing films in Korean history. So, I mean, they could do a lot worse than trying to tell another story with these great characters.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was reading it was the top grossing film of 2024 thus
Mm,
far, and has won garnered a number of awards,
mm.
and yeah, people love it. So yeah, yeah, I think definitely there's potential for sequels and continuing, well, not continuing the story, but maybe having a different mystery, that these occultists can solve, and keep it going for a couple more installments. I would be on board for that. Yeah.
Totally. Anyway, this has been another installment of our Halloween Horror Fest. If you're not usually a fan of horror films, definitely check out Exhuma this season. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Slog your way through the subtitles if you're not used to them. It's well worth the experience. Please like and subscribe. We'll be coming your way from Tenian's Corner with more content.